Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, Seahawk fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers, here to talk Seahawks football. We are in our very last position group segment of this long series that we've just kind of wrapped up. And we're on to special teams today, talking about kickers, punters, long snappers, and gunners, and kick returners, and all that kind of fun stuff. And should be a fun show. Welcome in.
Yeah, it should be a fun show. We've got a lot to talk about here, which normally you think special teams and Seattle, and you're like, well, this is already set, right? Because they've got, two really good ones at kicker and punter, and they've been pretty stable at long snapper for a while. But there's a lot more to special teams than just that, and they're not quite as stable at long snapper for the moment. So we'll see how this goes. And it's a lot to talk about.
Yeah. Well, where they are stable is their two main guys that we think about when we talk about special teams, and that's Jason Myers and Michael Dixon, both signed through the 2025 season. Jason Myers just signed an extension this January that'll pay him, an average of $5 million a year, which is, as things go, you think it's expensive. You can certainly do better if you draft a kicker straight out of college. And you can lower that cap hit. But when you've got somebody like Jason Myers, age 31, making the Pro Bowl last season, had a career year, you feel pretty good about paying somebody that, so that you can ensure that part of your that your team is just taken care of. You don't have to worry about it, and that's the case with Jason Myers for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he's been good as far as field goals, and that's why he was Pro Bowler and all that. There are a couple things that I think the team would like him to work on and get better at. One of which is touchbacks on kickoffs, because he last year only had 54% of his kickoffs go for for a touchback, and that is really one of the lower numbers in the entire league. And for a guy that's known for having a pretty big leg, like I guess it's 58, sorry, not 54, but still, for a guy that's known for having a pretty big leg, it's kind of odd that it's that low.
Yeah, interesting. It's and then they changed the rule a little bit with regards to touchbacks, in that players can signal for a fair catch and they still bring it out to the 25. Isn't that correct on kickoffs?
Yeah,
that's
true.
Which may add to his total. I don't know. And another thing I was thinking too is maybe they prefer that. So, and the reason that I say that is that some teams have really good special teams. The Seahawks are one of them, and with the way that is coached with them is they want the opportunity to try to get that ball out, cause a turnover, with their guys, and they would rather, if you take a look at the average starting point for drives, I don't know what the difference is. I don't have that information handy, but I can't imagine it's too much over 25-yard line for their opponents, and maybe they would rather give up the 2 extra yards on average versus the opportunity to cause some havoc or really have one that starts at the 10 or the 12 or whatever, which has happened as well. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, honestly, when you're the better team, you want to lower variance, right? Lower the randomness that can happen. And in that case, I'm like, just kick it into the end zone and be done with it. And that might be a case where last year they knew they were this was a rebuilding team and they're trying to make stuff happen. And so, yeah, maybe they are asking him to drop it down right on the goal line and make guys make a decision with the football and that kind of stuff. We don't know. I just know that, like, when I look at around the league, right, you're looking at almost everybody is 65% or better, and he's at 58. So it's a pretty big drop. And there's got to be a reason for it, because this is a guy with a big leg. This is a guy that
Yeah.
hits 55-yard field goals with pretty regularity. So
And
um,
we've seen him touch the back of the end zone on kickoffs as well. It's not like he can't. Yeah, I
yeah,
would imagine that it's coached that way, but I could be wrong. But before we finish up with Jason Myers, I wanted to just say that he was tied for second in field goals made last year at 34, fifth in total field goal percentage at 91.9, and fifth in points after touchdown makes. 34 or 37 field goal attempts, making all six from behind 50-yard line, and 41 of 42 point after attempts. Led the NFL in points scored with 143 and made the Pro Bowl. So, I
yeah,
mean, a great year all around. Deserved the
great year all around.
extension.
I wasn't trying to be overly critical there, because he is a guy that was incredibly dependable last year. And it's odd that at least within Seahawks Twitter, he's not thought of that way. Um,
He did have
and
an off season, not the year before, year before, but the year before that.
yeah, when he
He
first
kind
came
of
in,
struggled a little bit.
he started out struggling, and then everyone was complaining about him, and in the middle of them complaining about it, he set a franchise record, hitting 36 in a row. And no one's ever really kind of stopped complaining about him, and I don't really understand why. He's one
Because
of the better
people
kickers
like
in
to
the NFL.
complain. Yeah, people
Well,
like to
there's that.
complain, dude. You may have
There is
noticed that,
that.
but people do
Yeah,
like
they
to
do,
complain online.
especially on Twitter.
Uh-huh. Okay. So and then the next guy is it really kind of forms one of the best kicking duos in the league, really, and that's Michael Dixon, signed
Mhm.
through the 2025 season, originally drafted by Seattle. We not I think we drafted him in the fourth round, Keith. Um, and the guy's just been money, really. Finished eighth in the average yards per punt at 48.5, which is still stellar. Second
Yeah,
in
but
net average at
that's the thing.
44.4.
It's the net that matters.
Mm-hmm.
Guys that pound the ball really deep, but can't, they just outkick their coverage every time. That doesn't help you. Um,
Yeah.
and
But nonetheless, though, his 47.57 career average per kick is the best in NFL history. So I mean,
yeah.
you don't want to completely discount it. It is who it is. But yeah, you want the net. I mean, and that points to
Hmm.
the reason why it's called special teams. It's a combination of that plus coverage.
Yeah, and so you want the net. And that's the whole point there, is that you want guys to be, um, when you punt the ball, you don't want returns. And the fact that he's got a really nice average is awesome, but the fact that his net average is, for his all 3 years of his career, he's been, uh, top 2 or top 3 in the league. That shows you, like, how good he is. And that's really what you're looking for. And, on top of that, he's also proven to be really good at pinning teams back, and getting them, you know, inside the 20, inside the 10, and
Hmm.
and pinning guys back. So if you're punting, you're just outside of field goal range, and you decide to bring on the punt team, you better be able to pin them deep and not let that ball get into the end zone, because, um, right, if you're kicking off the 45 and you put it in the end zone, the ball comes out to 20, it's a 25-yard net. That's not worth it. Um, and in all of last year, he only had 3 balls get into the end zone. That's it.
Wow.
Um,
Wow, I did not know that.
yeah. So he had 22 that were down to inside the 20 with no
So
return. So,
for younger listeners, you won't even have known this name really, but for guys like us, been around for a while, I always you know looked at punting through the lens of Ray Guy. the
Mhm.
longtime punter for the Raiders,
Yep.
and he was a traditional kicker. Like he would punt in the way that all punters were taught how to punt, where the ball is placed, at a certain spot and an angle on your foot when you hit it, and it spins in a certain direction, and almost like a spiral. And it came down the same way every time, and he just boomed those things. Um, Michael Dixon's is quite a bit different than that, in that I
He does.
frequently see him drop these balls on his foot at different angles from different heights. Sometimes they're little poochies on the side. He looks like he's got like 10 different ways that he makes contact with the ball at any given time.
Mhm.
And it still goes the distance that you would expect. But it's just kind of it's crazy to me. So
Yeah.
what do you make of all that?
Well, he's got such great, like, foot-eye coordination that he can do those kinda things, and most guys, you don't want them even trying. Um, but his ability to put different spins on the ball, one time he'll hit it and it'll spiral just, Ray Guy style, and the next one, it'll spiral in the other direction. Um, and that makes it really hard to catch
Or it
because
won't
you're
spiral at all. It'll tumble.
yeah, or it'll have a backspin to it. It just every time it's a little bit different. I think he does it on purpose because he's trying to get guys um, to drop the ball and to muff the catch, and it's worked. I think it worked a lot more his rookie year. I think teams have started getting their returners to prep for it because it's a weapon to have a guy like that, and so it hasn't worked quite as often as it did his rookie year, but it still works, and it's still one of those things. And as long as he's putting in the average, he's hitting the length, he's hitting his spots in terms of inside the 20, um, and the net average, and all those things are still there. Why wouldn't you want him to do those kind of things, right? Just if you can generate 3 more turnovers over the course of the season because you're able to spin the ball a little differently. That can be huge.
Yeah.
That can make or break a couple games.
Yeah, he had a huge soccer background as well as rugby,
Mhm.
obviously from Australia. And yeah, I mean, he works hard at his craft. They practice these things on a daily basis in their special teams coverages and so forth. And he's one of the best. So it's fun having Michael Dixon's one of those players where you don't have to pay him too much, but he's definitely top three punter in the league. And I could definitely see him being here for his entire career, type of a guy. He just
Yeah.
is solid. You barely notice him. Otherwise, he's not a distraction. He just does his job really well. Okay. So the next spot I want to talk about is the long snapper spot, previously occupied by Tyler Ott. We had a guy named Tinker that finished last season, and they didn't bring either one of those guys back. They were unrestricted, and they
Mhm.
decided, or maybe one of them was restricted but didn't get tendered. Um, I didn't know exactly what to make of that because I thought both guys did a really good job, and they weren't making that much money. To
Mhm.
re-sign Tinker for a 1 year deal or even a 2 or 3 year deal wasn't going to cost much more than the league minimum. But they decided to not do anything. They didn't do anything really in the draft. You don't really draft these guys. They just kind of show up. We ended up getting one of the best long snappers in the nation to come to rookie minicamp as an undrafted rookie free agent in Chris Stoll. And that seems like it's his job to lose now.
Well, he's the only one on the roster currently, who can do the job, and so, yeah, they've kinda handed him to the job. I mean, you're right about his job to lose. If he comes into camp or in preseason and screws things up, they'll, you know, cut him and bring Tinker or Ott back in a second, but, yeah, they definitely seem to be wanting to get younger. I the difference between, league minimum for a guy like Tyler Ott and, um Chris Stoll's contract is about 350,000 a year, which isn't that much when you've got a guy that you can depend on. Um, but like you said, this was one of the best. I think it was he's the best long snapper in the draft class. Again, not that you'd ever draft a long snapper, but um, 6'2", 255. He runs pretty well, and one of the reasons why um, the Seahawks went with they've made some changes at this position during Pete Carroll's time here. Is they've kept wanting to get better at guys being able to get downfield and help, and not just snap the ball and then stand there and watch. And um, he this guy's got the size and he runs well and he blocks well. 255. It doesn't sound like an offensive lineman, but you really are a center on those plays. You need to be able uh, to help. Now they can't. No teams can't line a guy directly over you,
Right.
so you're
You can have
protected a
somebody
little
really
bit.
undersized. Yeah.
Yeah, you can have someone undersized, but you still need to be able to help because if they've got somebody who can just come right up the middle at your punter or at your kicker, that's a problem. So you've got to be able to do your job, and this guy can. And he on punts he can get downfield and um, help cover. So that might be part of it. It's more than just the snapping part, but we've also seen what happens um, when the snapping part goes bad, right? We saw that a couple of years or for a few years ago before Tyler Ott came to town when they had a guy that just couldn't hit his spots snapping the ball well. And they went to him as a guy who, because he could get downfield and those kind of things, he was more athletic. And that was a mistake. So then they made that switch, brought in on Tyler Ott, and he's been great until he got hurt. Tinker did great, but I think it comes down to part of it is if um, there are guys out there who can do this job, and they're going to spend as little on the position as possible,
Yeah.
and that might just
Well,
be where it is.
in the opposite end of the spectrum, we've got Nick Bellore, special teams captain for quite a few years now, and they just re-signed him on a 2-year extension in February. He can make up to $6.6 million over 2 years. He's got 3.75
Crazy.
million in his first year. He's just a
Hmm.
special teams guy. That's it. That he takes 4 or 5 snaps a year at other positions, at linebacker or at fullback or whatever. But he's a special teams guy. He led the team with 352 special team snaps last season. Turned 34 years old this year, and made the Pro Bowl.
Hmm.
So I mean, it's kind of crazy, but he's a good player and he's a good locker room guy.
He's a
And
great locker room guy. He's the captain, as you mentioned. But more than that, he is an extra coach for special teams. He can get in there and teach. He gets in there um, and really instructs on how to get off a jam and how to um, not get run out of your lane and things like that. You see him teaching all the time during camp. Yeah, I've seen him teaching during the game, talking to these like young receivers that they're not there to play receiver unless someone gets hurt. They're there for special teams, and he's there, and you can tell just the way he's using his hands, and they're talking about stuff that he's instructing and he's teaching, and um, that's part of it with him. Like it's hard to justify $3.5 million for a guy that doesn't see the field on offense or defense, but um, he's one of the best. So there's a reason why he's a Pro Bowler. Like is the he's a guy that the team really values, the coaches value, and they value him because of not just what he does on the field, but what he does in the locker room, what he does on the sidelines. And it's a lot of money for a guy like that, but still, um, very few guys make the Pro Bowl just because of their ability to cover kicks,
yeah.
right?
Well, and one of them is our coach, Larry Izzo. 14 years in the league as a player, started coaching special teams in 2011. Has been a Seahawks coach since 2020. And Seattle was named the third ranked DVOA special teams team in 2020 and 2021. Rick Gosselin's 2022 NFL special teams rankings had Seattle at number 2 behind Houston as the best special teams team in the league. Yeah, so it's a well coached team, and
Hmm.
it wouldn't shock me if Nick Ballore ends up being a special teams coach. I think that's that's his future if he wants it.
Yep.
I think he's gonna hopefully. No, I'm not going to say hopefully. I was going to say this is probably maybe his last contract, but who knows? Guys like this, he's making that kind of money, but he's only playing 370 snaps a year. His body's going to hold up as long as he stays in shape. So
Yeah, but
we'll,
he's
we'll
also getting older. He's 34.
yeah,
His next contract, he'll be 36. Like you've
yeah,
got to have speed to do his job. And at 36, your speed is starting to drop.
yeah, yeah. So
Let's stick with Gunners because there's some other guys on here that we need to talk about.
oh, absolutely, yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I was going to get back to that for sure. Um, Last year we Cody Barton, Tanner Muse had the second and third ranked snaps for this team. Tanner Muse is no longer here. Cody Barton's not going to be back. DJ Dallas was next up with Derek Young, Colby Parkinson. Those guys are going to be back, and I would imagine will lead the special teams play. But there's all sorts of other guys that contribute as well. In fact, you've still got offensive linemen that play special teams as well. But let's talk about the guys that are gunners, guys that are kick returners and punt returners for this team. It seems like Godwin Abuaki
Hmm.
last year came on, played in 5 games, and darn near led the league in return average kick returns. He was kind of electric. He had a few, consistently 40 yards or so, moving the ball, flipping the field for the special teams play. And honestly, I was surprised that the Seahawks didn't extend him an offer to come back. He would have been very inexpensive and kind of locked down that spot. But I think that they might want an opportunity for a couple other guys to kind of come forward and do that. But anyway, you wanted to talk about gunners. Let's talk about gunners, and then we can talk about those guys.
Yeah, so you mentioned a couple of names that I think we need to start with. And like the wide receiver, um,
Derek Young.
yeah, Jarek Young,
Mm-hmm.
6'2", 224 with just an endless amount of speed. Big guy, very fast guy, got downfield as well as anyone. Um, Needs to, make sure that he gets home when he gets down there, but makes a lot of plays. Makes a lot of plays um, when he gets downfield, and even if he doesn't make the tackle, he changes what's going on. And he's a guy that you look at and you go, well, if he the TX are 4 deep or 3 deep at the top with receiver, and then you're gonna have a couple other guys. Those couple other guys better be special teams like
Mm-hmm.
mainstays, and
Absolutely.
it gives a guy like Derek Young a leg up. The fact that he's proven that he can be really good on special teams, and so that'll help him make the roster. Um, and then give him an opportunity to do other things. I'm excited to see what some of these other guys come in and do.
Me too,
Um,
actually.
and there's some guys on here that are really interesting when it comes to special team stuff. A guy like John Hall, an undrafted rookie, 6'3", 194, and can run pretty well. Guys like that, seeing them get downfield, like they're gonna with that speed, you're gonna have opportunities. You mentioned Colby Parkinson, which when I was looking at this, I found that to be kind of surprising because he's big, but he's not the fastest guy, right? But, he's 6'7", and,
Right.
but he was able to, um, get off the snap because they don't he's not a gunner, he's not outside, right? He's in line, but he's able to get off the snap, get downfield, cover the middle of the field, and make plays, and, they like that in him, and that's the thing that you've gotta be able to do if you're gonna be the 3rd or 4th tight end. It's also part of the reason why the team keeps Tyler Mabry around.
Mm-hmm.
Even though he's been on the practice squad for a lot of the time he's been here, they keep him around because he can do those kind of things too.
Even a guy like Will Disley ended up having 180 special team snaps last year. Kobe
Hmm.
Parkinson had 193, so even they're asking Will Disley to
Hmm.
stay in there and do that as well. Joey Blount was another kid that had 175 snaps last year. I don't even know if he's going to make the roster based on the safety conversation we had a couple
Yeah.
shows ago. It's going to be really tight. Tariq Woolen played 118 snaps last year. I'm not sure if Tariq Woolen ends up playing special teams this year. We'll see. They might want to guard his knee a little bit. He had that little
Hmm.
cleanup done this offseason. We'll see how that goes. But that's just another opportunity for other guys to kind of step up as well.
Well, this is where you're going to
I
see guys like Jarek Reed step into that role
totally,
and
totally,
and
totally.
go from being, okay, so Woolen's not in there anymore, but now you've got this extra safety who works as hard as anybody and has some good measurables that can slide in and take that job.
Yeah. Yeah. John Radigan, they really like as a linebacker prospect. He'd be a
Hmm.
guy that would be, definitely earn his salary on special teams. Even a guy like outside linebacker Derek Hall would get some more opportunities to see the field playing special teams. He's got that speed and size to be a great tackler. Kobe Bryant, done their cornerback. I think they like him in that role. Levi Jones, the linebacker, possibly make the roster on special teams play. Trey Brown, Zach Charbonnet, I understand, is a great gunner guy on the outside that might step in there as well. Mike Jackson likes to play special teams. He'd probably have 100 snaps, I think, if he does not end up getting that starting role. For sure, Kenny McIntosh is another player that we could see maybe possibly work into a kick returning type of a role for them
Hmm.
instead of Buaki or Dallas. Um, I would like to see a little bit of competition there. I know the team, speaking of returners, I know the team likes Aesop Winston Jr. in that. In fact,
Yes.
Pete Carroll mentioned him, signaled him out as a guy that works hard and is kind of electric out there. So we'll see that as well.
Yeah. I mean, he's a guy that's part of the reason why he's here is because of that. Um, the thing with the kick return situation is that uh, they've got guys who can do that job. Tyler Lockett was one of the best ever when he had that job. He only had it for a
Hmm.
couple of years, um, and then he broke his leg, and the team has had him in there only in absolute must-win, late in game kind of spots. They keep him out of there because they don't want to see him get hurt. Um, but he's really freaking good at that job. Um, but they don't want him in that job. He's too valuable to get hurt on special teams. So they want other people to. DJ Dallas did a pretty good job last year. Um, didn't have great
Yeah,
stats, but was there were times when he was electric. His open field ability showed up at times.
I don't know
Um, a-
about electric. I don't know if the electric is the right word. I would say that steady is better.
yeah, but he looked more than steady in that his speed and his ability to make people miss. Um, wasn't great blocking in front of him. It's the current rules make it really hard for returners to do a lot because you can't form a wedge in front of him. You can't have more than two guys next to each other blocking, and so it makes it hard to read and that kind of stuff. But he was able to when he had to return like a kick and it because it didn't get to the end zone or it was only 1 foot in and he didn't trust that he would be given um the touchback. He did a good job of getting it out past the 25, pretty regularly, and always looked like he was 1 or 2 blocks away from breaking a huge one. I liked him in that role. He's very steady, didn't drop the ball.
Yeah, I would
Um,
say that he's
so
steady, but yeah, I'm not going to say that he's electric or really gives the team an opportunity to have anything more than that. Sorry, getting a little buzz on this thing. Um, I would say I would really like to see Eskridge in that role. I think that
they drafted him
he's
to be in that role, but he can't get on
yeah,
the field.
yeah, and I know, and so, but nonetheless, he's on the bubble as far as making the roster and having an impact on special teams and all that kind of stuff. And this is a way for him to be on the field. And I think that the team really would prefer he go out and win that job. Um, and I would prefer that he'd be able to go out and win that job as well. And I think that he would be way more electric when healthy than than DJ Dallas. I mean, Eskridge has got 4.34 speed,
Sure,
and
he
DJ
does.
Dallas is a 4.5 guy.
DJ
Yeah,
Dallas also has stayed healthy. Um,
that is
and
very true.
Eskridge has yet to play. Um, the guy
No,
that I think
absolutely.
the guy I think is that's ultimately gonna win that job, though, you mentioned already, and that would be Kenny McIntosh. Um, he's the team wants to figure out a way to get him on the roster, as a 4th or 5th running back, and that's good. You do that if you're the kick returner, and I think that's going to be his route towards a roster spot is doing that, and he's just kinda built for it. Like, I know that
Hmm.
his testing numbers at the combine weren't great, but go watch his tape. He plays a lot faster than his combine numbers suggest, and I think just having him out there to, do those things and he's a guy that's kind of the role that's built for him, and I honestly expect him to win that job.
You too. I totally agree. Like another guy to watch, sneaking on the back end of the team would be a guy like Noah Grindorf, the unrestricted Ricky free agent tight end, or Griffin Herbert. Both those guys have some speed and have good hands, and if they're going to make the roster on the peripheral, that would be a way that they would be able to do it. Cody Thompson has made a living so far, living on the edge of the roster and being able to play special teams.
Mhm.
So that would be interesting. A guy like Jake Bobo, who's turned out to be a nice find for them as an unrestricted, undrafted guy so far in camp. Doesn't have a lot of speed, so I don't think he would necessarily be a gunner, but he would be a guy that would have to play special teams and be very successful at it in order to make this roster.
Well, yeah, but you don't have to be a gunner or a return guy to do that. You can be, um one of the guys that's in front of the returner, blocker there to pick up, someone if it comes off the side of someone's foot, that kind of stuff. You can carve out a role of things that you can do on special teams. Um, Obviously, the more that you can do, the more valuable you are. And if
Hmm.
that's all you've got, that's going to make it harder. But there are different jobs that he can do. He could, with that height, be a guy that comes off the edge on, um, field goal attempts and tries to block them. So we've seen that, which actually makes me want to talk about something that back in the Legion of Boom days, right? You saw a lot of Brandon Browner and Richard Sherman on special teams, even though they were the starters.
Yeah, you
You'd
did.
see Doug Baldwin in there coming off the edge to block kicks or block field goals. Um, you'd see guys that you wouldn't expect to be on the field for those situations on the field in those situations. Um, the team seems to have gotten away from that a little bit. Um, and I don't know if that's just because of the fact that, like, Doug Baldwin's career was shorter than it probably should have been because of a knee injury or any of that stuff, but I'd love to see this team make an effort to get their best players, their best athletes on the field more. Obviously limit it a little bit because you don't want guys getting hurt, but,
But
a
there's
guy like
certain times in games where you could have an impact on a game by making
yeah,
a play. Yeah.
having a guy like Nawasu come off the edge, to block a kick, like, why wouldn't you want that? Like,
And
he's
we already
so
saw
dynamic
Tariq
in that.
Woolen do that last year as well. Mike
Yeah.
Jackson returned out, 90 yards for a touchdown last year. One of the best special teams plays of the year for sure.
Yeah, so, we like I said, we haven't seen a lot of that this year, but it would be, um
So you might want guys out there like Witherspoon or Trey Brown or even Woolen, maybe even Njigba would have an opportunity to return kicks or be on special teams as well. I've already mentioned Zach Charbonnet. You mentioned Kenny McIntosh,
I was thinking guys like
Jarek Reed.
Daryl Taylor.
Yeah.
Boye Mafe.
Oh,
Just getting some of the better athletes on the field. Now, again, you don't want guys getting hurt doing that if they're especially if they're starters and that kind of stuff because it's like, oh, now you don't have your starting corner because you had Woolen in there and he, tweaked his knee a little bit or something like that. So you got to be careful with it. But at the same time, like you need to have guys that can come in and do the job and your best athletes if you're not allowing your best athletes, your best players out there, it hurts your overall ability. Um, Now, granted, last year the team had fantastic special teams overall. You said the number two,
mhm.
ranked special teams units, and that was with very little of the starters getting reps out there. And so, I'm willing to, let Izzo do his job, and he's clearly very good at it. Um, and that, but when it comes down to it, right at the end of the game, if you need a punt return to set you up um, for a chance for a game-winning drive, um, why wouldn't you put Tyler Lockett out there in that situation?
I think that Seattle actually has a chance to improve this year on special teams. And we already know that Pete Carroll loves special teams as a pillar
Hmm.
of what's important for him to be able to win games. We're losing Tyler Muse, Cody Barton, Josh Jones took 166 snaps last year. Travis Homer had 130 snaps. Justin Coleman, 120 snaps. Ryan Neal, over 100 snaps. Tease Tabor,
Hmm.
um, those are all guys that are no longer going to be. The guys that had 1,400 snaps last year on special teams are no longer on the team. That's going to be a real opportunity for guys like Jarek Reed, Derek Hall, Kobe Bryant, John Radigan, Trey Brown, all the guys we mentioned as far as stepping up for roles that are starter guys. Witherspoon and Jigba, McIntosh, Charbonnet will fill those gaps, and I think those types of players. And we had a very good draft, I believe, and we have very good athletes on this team that are able to fill those spots. And I think even better than what we had prior. And those teams were well coached and did a great job. Second in the NFL in special teams overall when they average, coverage, start points, where you start drives, tackles for lost turnovers, etc. That's how you measure special teams, and I think that we're going to be even better this year.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see about that because those names that you mentioned, Cody Barton and Travis Homer, especially, are really good, experienced guys at getting downfield and making tackles and preventing returns. Those guys made a lot of tackles
Hmm.
on special teams, and that's a lot of production to replace. Now, you can put a guy in there that's more athletic, right? You can go, okay, well, we'll just stick. Tariq Young in there and be better and faster, but it's more than just the speed, right? You've got to be able to um, break down what's going on, get in position, make the tackle. And guys that have figured out how to do that really well aren't as easily replaced just because maybe they're a little older or a little less athletic. I mean,
Hmm.
Nick Ballore is not the most athletic guy, but he's one of the best in the NFL at that job because he gets all the little intricacies of everything that you've got to do with it. And so, uh, yeah, I mean, it's going to be there's some turnover. We'll see what happens with that, but there is definitely some turnover on special teams. There's always turnover on special teams, right? Because these are the guys that are the bottom third of the roster, and so there's a lot of turnover every year. But it comes down to coaching, and that's obviously the Seahawks have a great one. They've got their headliners, right? The punter, kicker, um, captain, and Nick Ballore. They just got to they filling around it. Guys got to learn and do their job.
Yeah, it just comes down to desire. I mean, special teams is desire, and I think we're going to be fine, totally fine.
Yep.
Okay, so let's wrap this thing up. We've got some great shows coming up. Let me get into that really quick. We have got an NFC West preview show coming up, the next show after this, and then we're going to take a look at a wider look at the NFC overall as well, and a show coming up. We're going to do a coaches show talk about all the coaches. We just talked about one today. We'll talk about all the others. And we got a fun show coming up that we have had on our radar for a long time, but haven't completely, it's fallen off. It's one of the shows that have fallen off if we just didn't have time for it. And it's a look back in history, our favorite all-time Seahawks, our favorite plays, our favorite coaches, memories, etc. That'll be a fun show because we kind of go way back, both of us. And then our right before 4th of July is our 7th annual beer sampling show and question and answer show. The early poll between Keith and I is that we're going to do a dark beer show, stouts, etc. And we'll see how that goes because I'm not that drinker. So I have a lot to learn if we go that direction. And so that might be fun for me for sure. I know it's going to be fun for you because
it's going to be fun for me because that's my style. So
yeah. Well, let's do that then. Yeah, because
okay.
if we did my style,
which is what we did last year.
We did the last year. Yeah.
We did the
So,
ambers and stuff. So, and the year before it, we did the IPAs, which is neither of our style, but still
true.
Was very interesting for us to get through and to try some.
Yeah. So that'll be fun. That's always a fun show because by the time we get done with the show, anything can happen.
So the first couple of years we did it with our predictions for the year. And the joke was always that, we were going to be pretty reserved about our predictions at the start of the show, but by the end we're like, woo, 16-0 in the Super Bowl. It never quite got that way, but that was always a joke leading into it. But yeah, it's fun.
Yeah. And those shows are fun for us because quite often some of those questions go way beyond football. We kind of leave it open-ended. So we talk about philosophy and physics and vaccines and who the heck knows, right? It just pretty much anything. So that's a fun one to look forward to. All right, let's get out of here. Find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. You can find me at NWC Hawk. The show is on your favorite podcast platform. All you have to do is look for it. Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Hit that subscribe button. Share it. Leave a nice review if you enjoy the show. You can find us on your on the YouTube channel as well. Seahawks Playbook Podcast, and hit that subscribe button. So until next time, take care, guys. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NWCHawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.